Welcome back to another video in this series of tips and tricks for your cosplay shootings. Today we are going to talk about a very fun and creative way to give some of your pictures that little extra that draws the viewer into your pictures, or even more, makes them become part of your images. So let's talk a bit on how to use different camera interactions to create immersive images. On the technical side, this video may seem more interesting for photographers, but I made sure that I included a lot of tips for cosplayers as well, so that you can learn how to directly interact with the camera and still looking nice meanwhile. Plus, both of you might get some inspirations for your next photo shootings, so stay tuned. Okay, first off, what makes an image immersive? We all know how that typical cosplay photo looks like. There is a person doing a pose. We see that casual moment, something might be going on. Maybe it's a very cinematic image that gives us the feeling of realness in some way, or we are looking at a portrait. So the cosplayer is looking at us in this one here. But does this eye contact make the image immersive? Does it draw us into the picture or even lets us become part of it? When you look at that portrait, seeing the person looking back at you, do you feel like another character in this scene who's part of the world she's in? In this case, it's just a portrait. I sound a bit like Jonathan Frakes here. In this case, it's just a portrait. Or is it? You're Jonathan Frakes. Does he say it like that in English? I don't know. In German, he says it like that. Okay, we have a very intense portrait here with that incredible expression, that direct eye contact, but still, we are not meant to be part of it. So what makes an image immersive then? I'm going to show and analyze some of my pictures with you now and teach you some techniques on how to create immersive images yourself. There are tons of different possibilities and varieties here, and you can mix up and combine everything that I'm going to show you now. So feel free to use my tips as an inspiration and not as set rules. Basically, you can create immersion by any kind of interaction that is going on between the cosplayer and the camera, aka the viewer, or the other way around, depending on who's in charge of the action that is going on. The first thing you want to decide is what role or perspective you want to give the viewer. In this video, we are going to cover 3 different kinds of those. An unspecific but preset person from that world who is not directly meant to be us, a specific character, and how to make the viewer become part of the image as themselves. After defining a role for your viewer, you can get playful and creative by choosing the kind of immersion you want them to feel. We are going to talk about 4 of them. Direct interaction, passively being part of the picture, the meta point of view, and breaking the 4th wall. Okay, let's start by giving our viewer an unspecific but preset role in the picture. This is when the person whose eyes we are looking through is not a character we know. It could be anybody else from the setting we are in. But still there are some conditions given that prevent the viewer from seeing themselves 100% in that person. Like in this picture, for example. We see Orianna, a character from the Witcher universe, who reaches out her hand to a person much smaller than her, presumably a child. We also know that because of her background story. In the game, Orianna runs an orphanage where she takes care of children. So that's what sets the perspective for our image, literally. I brought the camera to the eye level of a child, the cosplayer doing the typical caring gesture of offering her hand. The person for whose eyes we are looking is unspecified, because it could be any child in the Witcher universe. But it's also preset by the conditions of their age and body size. So we might not identify fully with them, but still can imagine their feelings. Now let's take a look at a pretty similar scene, but this time with a specific character as the viewer's perspective. Here we see the happy mask salesman from Zelda Majora's Mask, awaiting the protagonist Link to hand him the special mask he should get him. Here we as the viewer are directly placed in the role of Link, taking part in his story from his perspective. We know this story. We can identify through the picture by this knowledge, just as with the image I've shown you before. But we can also go and mix these 2 categories up, like in this example. Here we have Faith, a character from Far Cry 5, leading us into the wonderful drug world of bliss. Since you play the game from an ego perspective, and you can design the character in the beginning of the game yourself, this arm belongs to a specific character, as well as to our preset self. Now, what about the viewer being part of the image as truly themselves? When you want to achieve this, it's best when you don't give any hints about the person for whose eyes we are looking, aka ourselves. This means no gender, no age, body conditions or height. But it might also work out well when you show parts of objects we are holding, like weapons or slight impressions of our clothing. To achieve a neutral height and still keep up that eye contact to the cosplayer, which we need to make the picture immersive by creating this contact point, you can try to use neutral camera positions and perspective that fit the ongoing moment, like in this picture, where we look into the sewers through a small window of water drainage and get to see good old Pennywise. The perspective and how he looks up a bit tells us that we are kneeling on the street. In this moment, with the antagonist of The Evil Within 2, Stefano, we might be standing while he slices his knife through our body. But since it's dark around us and we have no other orientation, we can't really tell our position or posture. Pictures like these leave it all open to us. There is no illogical physical or imaginary barrier in between us and the character who we are interacting with. Okay, so these were 3 ways on how to give the viewer a role in the picture. Now let's talk about the different settings we can create. First off, direct interaction. Remember kind Orianna from the beginning? Well, maybe I should also mention that she is a vampire, and she takes advantage of a charity business, using the orphanage as a supply for fresh blood. And suddenly the mood of our image shifts a bit, right? Here we have a direct interaction, through her look at us and offering us her hand. And because we know the backstory, we immediately feel that emotional response of, no thanks. But since it's not us, but the eyes of the kid we are looking through, we have no choice but awaiting what is going to happen. One could also say that this is more of a passive moment then, because of the role we are given here and our lack of freedom of choice. And you can also see it like this if you like to. As I said, there are no strict rules, and this is just a toolbox to play around with. Let's have a look at another very direct interaction from this series. Here we have even less of a choice, since Orianna's hands are already on our head, beginning to block our sight, blood running from her slightly smiling lips, and we see the upper and lower part of the image getting blurry, awaiting the upcoming fainting. In this one we shift who's in charge of the situation. From today's point of view, I would shoot that image a bit different. But still, it's a good example to get a feeling for how you can place the viewer in a different way. We see Ellie from The Last of Us 2, desperately reaching out for her gun, while our shadow falls onto her. And if I had shot this a bit better, we could see that we are holding a machete in our hand. This time, it's us being the uncomfortable part of the picture. So, how to achieve this direct interaction? Keep direct eye contact to the camera, aka the viewer. Go for actions that involve the viewer directly, like reaching out or being reached out to. Set a believable, realistic eye level for that action and the role you give the viewer. Make the connection and interaction between the cosplayer and the viewer clear by avoiding distractions in the image. Let's move on to the next point, passively being part of the picture. Since I haven't got the right material to show you here, but I still wanted to share this inspiration with you, let me give you some short ideas for this. When being part of the scenery in a passive way, you have a realistic place in the setting by your positioning, your eye level, your height and perspective, but you're not directly interacting with the character. This can be when you're a random person on the street, seeing the character next to the bus station, maybe you're looking up from your newspaper to the side, gazing at them. Or you're part of a fight in a group, where your sight in the foreground is blurred out because you're looking over the shoulder of your attacker to the character on which the picture is about, but they're not looking at you. Or you are at a big place in the city, in the crowd, and you look between the busy walking people in front of you, peeking at the character who's just standing there, looking up into the sky. You are a silent observer, but you are still part of the world around the character, who could come up to you every second. Let's get on to the next way of immersion, the meta point of view. This is a creative technique for framing your immersive images by using the mechanics of the game or show you want to capture. Like in this example of Resident Evil 2 with Leon and Claire. Since you play the original games from a fixed camera position that resembles the view of a security camera, I implemented this idea to this shot as a quote of the game series. The same meta level is going on in this picture of Faith and the protagonist of the game, which you saw before, where I used the game's ego perspective to show the scene. And lastly, let's quickly talk about breaking the fourth wall. This one is not meant to be immersive in a classical way. Actually, it plays with it and breaks the immersion by taking over the control. When the fourth wall is broken, the fictional character in the picture actually knows that they're in a picture and that there is an outside world and an audience watching them. And you can do some creepy but also very funny stuff with that. Just think of the Deadpool comics and movies. A kind of breaking the fourth wall happened in this non-canon picture series of young handsome Jack from Borderlands being mocked by the upcoming presence of his older evil self in his head. We have the last picture here, where the imaginary Jack looks directly into the camera and to us as the viewer, like he wanted to say, "You know what's coming, guys." So, to get into breaking the fourth wall, I can give you these tips. Don't overthink perspective and realness with this, because the character knows that there is an audience looking through a camera. Play around with weird situations, because getting away from believable setups makes it easier. Mix up the character's universe with elements from yours, like letting the medieval or fantasy person stare at your camera, or grabbing the camera strap into the picture. Break the fourth wall of video game scenarios with turning to and interacting with the player, questioning their decision of wanting the character to jump out of a house or ripping the controller out of their hands. So, for the end of this video, I have some quick general tips for you that you can use to create any kind of immersive picture. This is it for this video on creating immersive cosplay pictures by interactions with the camera. I hope you got some inspirations out of this, and I wish you a lot of fun and creativity playing around with these techniques. Anyway, thank you for watching, folks, and see you next time.